Buenos días, bienvenidos a la
Good
presentación.
morning. Welcome to the presentation of the report by the World Bank, Fast Track to New Skills, Short Cycle Programs in Latin America and the Caribbean. In this virtual webinar, we will be talking about with the main author of this report, Marta Ferreira, the senior economist who works at the Senior Economist's Office for Latin America at the World Bank. Then we'll be accompanied by a panel of experts in education and employment. Our host is Carlos Felipe Jaramillo, Vice President of the World Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean. Participating in the discussion of the report, we would like to introduce LASCAL. It's an institution that is associated to Harvard University that is working in improving higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have the Executive Director, Angelica Nara. The pandemic of the COVID-19 has unleashed an unprecedented crisis in Latin America and in the Caribbean, affecting employment and production and throwing millions into poverty. This report analyzes the benefits of short cycle programs in the economic recovery, and it also proposes the necessary action to make them effective and better suited to a post-pandemic program. I am Josefina Tausen, a Peruvian journalist. I appreciate this opportunity to be a moderator in this panel. This is a topic of great importance for our country, for my country, one of the worst countries worst hit by the pandemic. We'll be starting with the presentation by Carlos Felipe Jaramillo, and then followed by Angelica Natera, and a presentation by Maria Marta Ferreira, who is the main author of the report. After that, there will be 2 rounds of questions for our panelists. Also, we would like to invite you via Twitter, where we'll be reading your comments at worldbank.lac. We'll leave you with Carlos Felipe. Thank you.
Gracias, Josefina.
Thank you, Josefina, and all of the participants taking part in this event. I greet you. Well, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an unprecedented crisis in Latin America and the Caribbean. It affected jobs and production and pushed millions of people into poverty. This really hit the region hard. Unemployment grew from 8 to 15% last year, and more than 20 million people lost their jobs. That's why we believe that it's very important to focus on the enjoyment agenda and to build human capital. We also know that in this pandemic, other jobs were created, while many were lost. There was an accelerated transformation in the economies. We have seen how machines and artificial intelligence, digital platforms have been replacing workers in many sectors, and perhaps some of these jobs will never be recovered. But it is clear that new jobs are being created, and these labor markets in the region are going to emerge from this crisis having undergone irreversible transformations. We've seen those who have more analytical skills, who are capable of analyzing information, of solving problems, working in teams. They've done quite well. Now, within this context, it's become critical and urgent for us to invest in new skills, the skills that jobs of the future will require. That's why we believe that short to higher educational programs can be extremely useful within this context. They can help to overcome the jobs and productivity crisis and prepare individuals for the current labor market. To train and to retrain the population is going to be essential, not just to help a transformation economic recovery that we're already seeing, but also for there to be greater equity and inclusion. This report shows how technical fields, vocational training, can help to tackle these challenges. As the title says, vocational or technical training is a quick and efficient way to develop these new skills that the labor market requires in our region. Evidence shows that in the majority of these programs, they produce good economic results with the advantage of developing skills and human capital in a shorter period, 2 or 3 years, and at a lower cost. And they also reach a broader population, especially those who earn the least in our region. By way of conclusion, I would say that in this context of crisis that our region is going through, short higher education programs can be a very useful tool, given the relatively low development level in Latin America compared with other regions. Short programs hold out great potential for growth. It will be necessary, however, for us to design policies and the necessary framework to develop this type of technical training. Latin America and the Caribbean need to swiftly build the human capital that the future calls for, endowing people with the necessary skills, especially our young people, for them to succeed in a labor market that is undergoing full transformation. Thank you very much.
Angélica Nate. Carlos Felipe, thank you very much. Let us now hear from Angélica Natera. Good morning, Angélica. We are ready for you. Thank you very much, Josefina. First of all, I would like to thank in a very special manner to the World Bank, and especially Maria Marta Ferreira for having invited us, LAFAO, to be a partner in the launching of the report, the fast track to new skills. This couldn't be a more propitious time for the launching of this time of report. Based on our close work with higher education institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean, and working closely around the strengthening processes, we have learned during this year and a half that the pandemic has made us reconsider everything, since one of the main concerns is the need to repose educational models and the relevance of education and of programs that are offered to the different sectors of society. Also, we have learned that higher education institutions in the region not only face growing and complex challenges with increasingly lower resources, but they're also exposed to an abundance of resources and knowledge. Reports such as the one led by Marta under the World Bank represents a great asset in order to accelerate the creation of solutions and to promote dialogue among key stakeholders. From LASCO, we'll be working closely with the World Bank in promoting this dialogue in an active manner in the coming months. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you very much, Angélica. Let us hear now from the main author of this report, Maria Marta Ferreira. Marta, good morning, and we are ready for you now. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Maria Marta Ferreira. I'm a senior economist at the World Bank. 4 years ago, we published a report on higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we entitled Decisive Moments, because at that time, we could already see the need to make fundamental and urgent decisions in the area of higher education. The report that we're bringing you today covers an aspect of higher education called short cycle programs, which in many countries really have not grabbed a lot of attention by policymakers or by implementers. However, it has a lot of potential, not only in helping with employment inclusion in our region. Without further ado, let us go to the presentation of our report.
Muy bien, y es un placer estar aquí presentando.
It is a pleasure to be here presenting the fast track towards new skills. This is joint work with my colleagues at the World Bank, Marina Bassi, and with Professor Sergio of the Maryland University. So what are the short higher education programs? It includes higher education, university programs for 4 or 6 years, and also short programs for 2 or 3 years. These programs are known by different names throughout the region. Some countries are known as technical programs, technological programs, others some tertiary careers or short-term careers. But once a person graduates for one of those programs, they receive a certificate, either as technician or a specialist in that area. What are those programs about? They're more practical than university programs, mainly geared towards the labor market. They can give continuity towards a university degree program, and depending on the country, they're offered by universities and or institutions of higher education. So these programs are a great promise for a region. First of all, they train human capital very quickly. And there are many different areas, from publicity, advertising, the hotel industry, programming, designing, and cybersecurity. They're attractive for very many students. For those who are not very much interested in following university career or don't have the time or resources, but also it offers new skills for students, even after having graduated from school or university. They're also very attractive for employers. According to the World Bank report, in order to find qualified employments, that is a major problem for 24% of employers. And also for 32% of employers in Latin America and the Caribbean have a hard time finding skilled workers. And this means that there's a mismatch between what the educational system is producing on the one hand and what the productive system requires on the other hand. In addition to this, there are some short programs that we have, the fast track programs. So what does data tell us about those programs? For starters, in our region, there has been a great expansion of higher education in the new millennium. So here we'll be taking a look at the enrollment in higher education, which measures the percentage of young people between 18 and 24 who enrolled in that type of higher education institution. We're going to be doing it for these different countries, for different regions of the world. And we see that throughout the region, this has expanded in other places of the world. But in our region, it has not been keeping up. At the same time, there are relatively few students in short programs. Here we'll be taking a look at all the students of higher education. We'll see what percentage are enrolled in those type of programs. Also, we're going to be looking at between 2017 throughout all the region, all throughout the world. We see that for a region, we already had a low percentage, and even now it's even lower, only 9%, which is a very low percentage regarding to the rest of the world. So who attend those programs? Students that are with least favored and under less traditional means. So when we compare students through bachelor programs with the short-term programs, we see the short cycle programs tend to attract older students, mostly a female population, urban students. They're married or they have another job. So they have to, they work and they go to school at the same time. And most of them come from low-income families or middle-income families. However, in spite of this, our programs that have the highest graduation rates. And we're going to be looking at the graduation rates for Latin America and the Caribbean for university and bachelor programs. And we'll see that in most of the countries in the region, those are short-term programs have higher graduation rates than the traditional programs. Also, graduating from a short-term program is much better than to start another program and to drop out. Here, we're going to be taking a look at the labor results in the educational area. We're going to be looking at what are the different outcomes obtained for high school students who completed high school as compared to people that did not complete their universities or other short-term programs. And then when we look at the lowest unemployment rate, those are coming from those other programs or incomplete university studies. Maybe they had to go find another job and they dropped out of school. So when we compare this to formal employment, then we look at the number of employees who are in the formal sector. And when we look at the wage salary level in relation to high school graduates, we see that those graduates coming out of short circuit programs have higher income than those that came out of other programs, whereas people that completed university degrees, they don't earn that much. These results are very important because virtually more than half of the students in the higher education in a region are persons who start but then drop out of those programs. So at least for some of these people, a short-term program would be an option and a challenge at the same time. Also, this offers is dynamic offer. We're going to be looking at different programs offered in Colombia. What's the average life term for a program ever since its launching until its completion? It's approximately 7-year average for a short term, but compared to 2 months for a university program. We have a way that in a given year, about 20% of short-term programs have opened up during that year, as compared to university programs. And in a given year, only 17, 18% of the short-term programs do complete and come to completion. And that's a lot better than university programs. In other words, short-term programs market moves much faster and more efficiently than university programs. Why? Because short-term programs respond more quickly to the needs of the local markets. So, for instance, although this year in Cali, Colombia, there is a higher demand for people who can work in automated industry, it is more feasible that those short-term programs would work out better in that market. In addition, short-term programs are related to private sector. According to the surveys that we conducted at the World Bank, we conducted that survey in 5 countries of the region. We talked to more than 5 directors of those programs, and thanks to those responses, we could collect that 100% of those programs are mandatory, or when it comes to short-term studies. Also, based on the data, we also the companies cooperate with the students' plan, and also they support them. Also, they have agreements with many local companies. They have the equipment to train the students. In addition, the employers are very satisfied with those graduates, and they have agreements to train professors. Also, the short-term programs are involved in the search for jobs for students, and they do it in many ways. For instance, they provide information on labor market vacancies that are open out there. They prepare them for interviews. They organize their job interviews, and in many cases, they manage employment centers. So now it is very important to underline that not all the short-term programs are good. And this is something that we documented extensively in a report. So what do the good programs do? What are the ones that produce good labor results, regardless of whether they attract a different type of students? What we found is that the graduates obtain and find more formal employment and better wages when they have attended programs that have connections with the industry, where they get assistance and support from their employers, but also when they have a better infrastructure, such as laboratories, workshops, and other facilities. Also, where there is an academic equivalency in the program, also possibility of moving on to further education programs, and also where there are professors with a very good experience in this area. So these good, successful programs did not come by chance, but they are designed to succeed. So if we only had good programs, if there was then students would have the interest and the means to access them. So how can we build this type of system? We'll be talking about some policies for this. First of all, to collect and disseminate information on the short-term programs. Many people don't know this type of information that we're providing here, and the returns, employability, and also other benefits. Also, in addition to the lack of information, of course, fosters more of that stigma. We need to oversee and regulate programs and institutions based mainly on labor outcomes of the students. And also, we have to prevent the existence of other programs that are yielding bad results. Also, we need to help in financing short-term programs because the main reason for dropouts are financial difficulties of the students. And in spite of that, there are more public subsidies for university students than for the short-term programs. In the end, we have to facilitate the pathway to higher education. And also we have to see this as something that is connecting different modules so we can provide credentials and certificate as the student completes each module, whether 1 year or more. So at this critical time, the region seeks different results in its educational system. And for this, we cannot continue doing as the region needs different policies and strategies, and it needs them now. Now is the time for those programs to be implemented. If it's not now, then when? Thank you very much.
Maria Marta, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. We would now like to welcome our distinguished panelists. Vanessa Gibson, the Director of Corporate Development from CINDE, the Investment Agency of Costa Rica. Santiago Levy, Main Researcher, Global Economy and Development, the Economic and Social Policy of Latin America Initiative. And Felipe Morgado, Executive Director of the National Industrial Learning System of Brazil, SENAI. In your experience, Vanessa, with companies, is there a demand for graduates from short cycle programs? Good morning. Yes, thank you very much for having me in this panel on such an interesting subject that is so present at this moment. In fact, nowadays, and we as CINDE, as an investment promotion agency, work in our daily lives receiving feedback from the companies that give us their experience, and they tell us that short cycle courses have become one of the preferred models from the entire productive sector. In our case, everything that has to do with degrees, certificates, and short training courses, these are the things that companies are promoting, not just with external actors, such as conversion centers or virtual training platforms. But what's important to note is that the companies themselves are taking advantage of their own capacity to create internal training academies with this type of short cycle courses to ensure the type of skills that they need to have. Thank you, Vanessa. Felipe, good morning. It is often said that we are living in a fourth industrial revolution because of the very fast changes that we are seeing in work centers and in terms of the skills that are needed. At this moment, what is the role of short cycle programs?
So technologies, first of all, good morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to congratulate Maria Marta for the research, and I would like to congratulate all involved in this activity. We are experiencing the fourth industrial revolution, where technologies are having a true impact in everything, mainly in the industrial sector. Everything that we believe and what we are studying and following with the development in Brazil, these technologies, they are influencing the market in two ways. First, they are polarizing the employment. They are demanding a greater specialization where these small or the short courses, they can give an interesting solution. Instead of the professionals being the operators of the productive process, they start being the programmers. And this results in these technologies, in these professions, require a higher complexity level to operate these machines. So SENAI is investing greatly in this process. And we started a project that is innovating together with companies, training professionals prepared for this revolution, the Industry 4.0.
Muchas gracias, Felipe. Vamos ahora con Santiago.
Thank you very much, Felipe. Santiago, good morning. How will the labor force be after the pandemic, and what is the role of education and short cycle programs specifically? Thank you, Josefina. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the World Bank for inviting me to be here today and congratulating Maria Marta, Lelis, Mariana, and Sergio for their excellent work that comes at a very good time for the region. What's going to happen after COVID, because the pandemic is not over, but when it finally is that our labor force is going to be much worse, because many companies will have gone broke and many will have problems of liquidity. So all of those who participate in the labor force on the side of supply are going to find it more difficult than they did before. Of course, when we reach the final numbers of this pandemic, we will see that many people left, but also many people lost their abilities to work. They lost their skills because of having been absent from work for such a long time. In that sense, short-term programs can help the economies of Latin America to
María Marta comentó algo en su
get up to
presentación.
par faster.
Dijo que estos problemas tienen un poquito de estigma y era
Maria
parte
Marta mentioned some of the problems that exist, and part of this has to do with stigma.
en la
Half
Alemania.
of the people who finish their preparatory course, the secondary course in Germany, go to higher education, and the other half go to short cycle program. There's no stigma at all. In Latin America, we have a problem of thinking that those who have degrees in law or engineering or other professions, after having spent 6 years in university, are more prestigious. But we need to change the culture norms and understand that for many people, that is not the best trajectory for their lives. And that a course that takes 2 or 3 years may be very practical and equally valuable, and that, as Maria Marta said, can produce very good results in the labor market with income that is very similar to those who actually graduate from a full university course. So the World Bank report comes at a very good moment. The important thing now is for it to be adequately disseminated so that everybody knows that this is a valuable alternative and that can help the countries to recover from COVID. Thank you. Thank you, Santiago. Vanessa, going to the second round of questions. Vanessa, why do companies have such difficulty in finding qualified personnel, and what can educational institutions do to alleviate these needs? Well, first of all, what we are seeing is an unbalance in terms of the difference between what companies want in terms of skills, what they need for the labor force, considering something that we have seen a lot in our multinational companies, that there are new processes that are coming up every day due to the new digital environment, which means that those who are outside of the labor market right now need to be trained. They need to be reskilled according to the skills needed now. But this also goes for those who are currently employed that are also going through the same dynamics. What we see right now is that with the readjustment of business models and with the new markets that are coming up, the emphasis that exists today with the new types of services means that these gaps are becoming bigger in terms of differences in the skills that companies need and the skills provided traditionally by our educational systems. And many times what happens is that educational institutions are not being able to solve the needs of our institutions. We need to be able to train our labor force, and for this we need to adjust. And the greatest challenge is how are we going to be able to translate the needs for skills that need to be extremely dynamic, that change very quickly, and that people need to be training all the time, becoming more specialized, in a world in which the traditional careers, the traditional university degrees follow traditional models. So this integration, this collaboration between the academia and the industry today is even more relevant than ever. And the main challenge that we see in the region and in the world in general is to see how we are going to be able to reduce the gap of communication between the companies and industries, entrepreneurs, and the academia. And on the side of the academia, this change of mentality from traditional careers, or this big gap between what is needed in terms of skills and what is provided.
¿De qué manera interactúa
Thank
SENAI?
you, Felipe. How does SENAI interact with private companies? How does SENAI make sure that it is actually training people according to the skills needed by private companies?
Well, SENAI, since
Ever
its
since
inception
SENAI was
over
created almost
80 years ago, it was created based on a demand from the productive sector, the Brazilian companies. SENAI is managed by the Federal Confederation of Industry and also by the Federal Industry of each state of Brazil.
Because of its
Due to
essence,
its
which was
core to
conceived
be developed
starting
for
with
the
the
private
industrial sector,
sector,
we
we
developed
developed
a
the
methodology
methodology specific to
SENAI,
SENAI, which we call
the
SENAI
SENAI
Educação
education methodology
Higher
for
Professional,
higher-level
where we
professionals,
studied
where
the
we
productive sector
listened
through
to the
three
productive
areas.
sector
First of all,
in three
we
ways.
try to
First,
identify, we have 28
technological
technical observatories where these observatories, based on a specifically prospective methodology, we define which were the technology that will be disseminated in Brazil in the next 5 or 10 years. Furthermore, we have a labor observatory where we have a methodology that defines which is the demand professional for specific areas in Brazil for the next 5 years. Based on that, we created a technical sectorial commission, which are formed by professionals specialized for small, medium, large companies, also academia,
and
also for several class entities, and also SENAI specialists. At this moment, right now, we have in this committee or this commission, we discuss all the abilities, which are the labor profile that of the private sector requests. Let's say the civil construction sector, which are the abilities that are necessary based from a carpenter or also a technician, talking about the technology on the construction civil up to the civil engineer. We call this itinerary to develop these abilities. So, you know, when the private, the productive sector, based on the specialist technology, identifying the demand of the labor market.
Thank you, Felipe. Santiago, in your opinion, why is enrollment in these programs still relatively low in the region in comparison to developed countries and other economies in the world? Yes, thank you, Josefina. We need to take into account that this has two sides, one side of supply and one side of demand. On the side of supply, we have short cycle programs.
Por el lado de la oferta están los
On the side of supply, we have short cycle programs, but there's also the side of demand that has to do with how the companies behave. And your question is very important because the structure of companies in Latin America is very different from the structure of European countries where these programs are much more successful. In Latin America, the large majority of companies are very small, and many of them are very informal. These companies do not really demand a lot of skilled labor in general. So side by side with short cycle programs that the World Bank is driving, which I think is very appropriate for it to do, we also need to take into account that measures need to be taken so that companies actually demand this type of skilled labor. So in addition to setting up good programs, this also requires ensuring that the companies are familiar with these programs and have access to them. So this goes especially for medium and small companies that are informal and that don't usually use the services provided by the government, including capacity building programs and human resources programs. So in addition to what Maria Marta described, there's an additional challenge that the labor ministries and education ministries need to take on to ensure that these programs have, on the side of demand, a growing demand and an active demand, so that eventually enrollment can grow as we would like it to.
Muchas gracias, Santiago, y tenemos tiempo para una tercera ronda.
Thank you, Santiago. We have time for a third round of questions for our panelists. This question is for Vanessa. What do the companies usually do when they do not find the labor that they're looking for? Do they hire people that are overqualified for the position? Or do they provide more training? Or do they just not set up in the country? I think that companies today
creativas a la hora de
are becoming more and more creative when they interact with the labor market. Amongst the things we see is that people are no longer really looking for a very specific profile with a specific university degree or something, because they're looking for skills. What is also very typical of the moment is that people are looking more for the type of profile that they find in short cycle courses, which they actually promote themselves as well. And this really doesn't have a lot to do with fees accredited by very well-known institutions. Companies are being very assertive in terms of what they are demanding, but also in terms of what they are providing in terms of training for the type of work that they require. In this sense, what we have seen is that many companies come with a well-defined profile that they need, and they go to the existing market that develop their skills, but companies that have time and money develop their own programs according specifically to what they need. Programs that enable them to develop the skills they need in 2, 3, or 6 months. In Costa Rica, in many of the jobs produced today, one thing that is required is that people speak English. So we have had to define how to work with companies, but also with private language institutions, so that people receive a hybrid capacity building, which is both technical and linguistic. And many times we have to develop their language skills from scratch. This includes the participation of the companies, but also from these institutions that have a very specific type of training to offer, which is short cycle programs that are technical and also provide languages. So unlike what we would have expected in the middle of the pandemic, the fact is that employment in our country has been greater than before the pandemic. But it's also a very dynamic situation in which people are very motivated to take these short cycle programs because of the motivation that they receive from the companies. And this has been very significant.
Now I have a question for Felipe. Throughout time, what lessons has SENAI learned in relation to how to design and to provide successful programs? Of course, this is of great interest for other institutions in the region.
Very, very good question. One of the lessons that we learned, Josefina, and I believe that is very relevant, it's to work with the productive sector. It makes no point to train professionals unless they are adapted to the needs. But then we need to evaluate we at SENAI, since '99, we evaluate 100% of our students as they complete a course. A year later, we see if they're still employed in both the formal or informal market. If they are in the formal market, we get in touch with the immediate supervisor to understand if they are indeed prepared to the needs requested in the sector. The third point that I would like to highlight, it's the vision of the students, mainly the technologists, because we have to allow that these courses to indeed, when completed, that they work fast. So if they want to move on to engineering or any master's or PhD program, continue their career without having to redo. This is what we call the itinerary. So we need to always train also the trainers. At SENAI, the instructor or the professor needs to be an engineer to whom we offer the pedagogic training. This is essential, and in Brazil, it is connected to our universities because they are preparing for the basic education or for the higher level engineering degrees. We attempt to do this pedagogic training adapted to the needs and in a more practical level. The technologists in Brazil require a lot of practice, hands-on work. So they have to work hand in hand with the industry so that the industry provides the best teaching skills. And then I would like to highlight infrastructure. It is very important for the technologists to know how to do, the capacity to execute the activities in the industry floor. And this is a capacity that we are developing with complex programs, integrating programs, through which we believe that to solve real industry problems during the training process allows these professionals to be trained with more excellency and more required by the labor market. For instance, SENAI, in the last research we did, of the technologists, they had higher employability. 88% were employed a year later after completion of the course. This is a very positive result that assured 95% satisfaction of the companies with the profile of these technologists trained by SENAI.
Thank you very much, Felipe. Now we're going to go with the third question for Santiago Levy. Santiago, the study found that graduates of short cycle programs, whether in the formal, informal sector, they continue more and there are fewer dropouts. How do you see this? Well, this is a welcome result, and clearly any policy, public policy action proposed in that regard is welcome, because it provides greater income and greater stability and security for employers. There's a lot of reasons behind why there is so much informal sector jobs in Latin America. There isn't a single policy that will solve this very serious problem. But seriously, we need to, improving the human capital has contributed to narrowing that informal sector. And to the extent that these programs are achieving that, they have a good impact in reducing the informal sector, and they're welcome, in addition to the individual benefit that the employer receives, the society as a whole benefits. For a last comment, and based on the studies and the very interesting results of the study with the World Bank, is an aspect that has to be taken into account is who manages that, who regulates those programs, and how are they evaluated. There is a certain tension in Latin America between programs that are managed under the Ministry of Education and those that are under the Labor Department or Ministry of Labor. So that's an important dimension. And we need to have clarity who's going to be financing, who's going to be the evaluation, and who's going to be providing the services or the programs. But if that general framework can be used, then it will be worthwhile to channel a large percentage of those programs, the investment into those programs that would yield higher returns more than other programs that are working in creating human capital. Thank you.
Santiago, muchas gracias.
Santiago, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Carlos Felipe Jaramillo, to Angelica Natera, to the members of the panel, Vanessa Gibson and Maria Marta Ferreira, the main author of the report that we have presented today. Thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon. And in order to read the report, we invite you to find further details by clicking on the link that will be available on this webpage. Thank you once again. Have a good afternoon.